Hi, good afternoon. It's so nice of you to join us today for CIO Leadership Live. I'm Mary Fran Johnson, the Executive Director of CIO Programs here at IDG, and I am very fortunate today to be joined by Shannon Gath, who is the Head of Technology for AMAG Pharmaceuticals here in Waltham, Massachusetts. Shannon joined the company in 2017, bringing more than 20 years of experience in IT along with her. AMAG is a mid-sized $440 million biopharmaceutical company founded in 1981. The company specializes in drugs used to treat anemia, at-risk pregnancies, and other women's health conditions. Before her current role at AMAG, Shannon was the Vice President of IT Operational Excellence at Fidelity Investments, and before that, she served as Director of Global Information Services at Vertex Pharmaceuticals. She started her career out as a mechanical engineer and holds a BS in mechanical engineering from Tufts University. Thanks so much for joining us today, Shannon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's start out talking a little bit about AMAG Pharmaceutical and its place in the biopharmaceutical industry, because I think everybody these days is paying a lot more attention to healthcare and a lot more interested in what the things that are going on the healthcare frontiers. So I know we have a lot of great stuff to talk about, but let's get a little more specific about your company.
About the company in itself. So, like you said, the company's about 40 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They went public in 1986 with the first drug around 2009, Feraheme, focused on anemia.
Mm-hmm.
And then shortly after that, in 2014, I believe, they launched Makena, which was to
Mm-hmm.
reduce the risk of reoccurring preterm birth. And
Yes.
then in 2017, we launched a drug, Intra-Rosa, which is for postmenopausal women
Mm-hmm.
that suffer from menopausal symptoms of painful sex. And then we look to launch next year
Mm-hmm.
another commercial product called Vyleesi, which helps premenopausal women with low sex desire.
Okay.
So we have a broad portfolio of commercial products, but the recent changes for us is we also brought in house 2 more development assets. So, still going through the investigational periods, working towards an FDA approval, one
Mm-hmm.
for helping with preeclampsia, and another one as a reversal agent for anticoagulants. So the big change for AMAG as a whole is, not only focusing on our commercial success, but also broadening the portfolio to have development assets in-house, so we have sort of longer-term plans of revenue and sort of having durable products in the portfolio. Mm-hmm. So it's been a big change for us because we've put a lot of focus on commercial, and now we're really building new capabilities in the clinical side of the house.
Okay. Well, and I noticed that too when I was doing a little bit of research on AMAG. I came across a couple of analyst views talking about the company and calling AMAG a great investment for biotech investors and noting the innovative technology and continuous product development.
Yeah.
So it does seem like one of those companies where technology is greatly respected and is definitely a big part of the growth strategy.
It absolutely is, and I felt nothing but complete top-down support since the first day I was there.
That's
really.
excellent, excellent. Well, and one of the things, let's fly up 30,000-foot view and talk about the pharmaceutical industry. What is disrupting things, the kind of things that are changing for your customers? I think one of the things you mentioned was that life science companies today all face similar headwinds in the market. Talk a little bit about that.
I think the way I see it, I try to put myself into sort of a patient lens, right? So if I think about healthcare in a broader sense, what I think we're all trying to work towards and achieve to is, where the patient experiences convenience, low cost, quality outcomes, and respect. Privacy is a big concern for those patients as well. So I think all the companies, whether you're a pharmaceutical or a payer or caregiver, working towards a place where that's the experience of a patient, I think everything else falls in line. The revenue is expected for strong companies' performance. But I think, where I see things going, you're going to have an integrated network that's connecting patients, caregivers, and logistics. And if you think about the players in that space, you have the big e-commerce giants of Alibaba and Amazon, who are slowly working their way into the healthcare industry by, acquiring, I think Amazon bought PillPack recently, and they're starting to get into that space. And guess what? they are fantastic at execution. So not only are they good at the customer experience, they're top notch, but they're also able to manage the logistics of getting, products to consumer quickly in a way that satisfies the customer,
Yes.
right? So they're going to play a big part in that network. I think pharmaceutical companies need to keep an eye on that and also figure out they need to be a valued part of that network and have their contribution to it. And the companies that figure that out are the ones that are going to be successful.
Yeah. Well, and it's inevitably going to be very strongly based in the technological capabilities
Yes.
that you can deliver. I'm thinking of some healthcare CIOs I've interviewed, and they've talked about connecting to Alexa.
Yeah.
So Alexa can, I guess, speak up and remind patients, it's time to take your medicine, that
Yeah.
sort of thing. There seems like there's going to be more and more of that going on. One of the things you also mentioned that you're seeing a big pivot going on in the market with kind of the older school life science companies even joining in on this, where you move from not just a focus on hospitals and doctors' offices, but direct to consumer.
Absolutely. I think,
Yeah.
I talk about that patient lens of convenience, right?
Yes.
So I think figuring out how to make your products work in a convenient fashion for patients is really important. So I think as far as a technology perspective goes, telemedicine is huge in that space.
Yeah.
And AMAG is already, marching in that direction. Our president, Bill Hayden, is a big fan of telemedicine. And it's, you think about it, trying to schedule a doctor's appointment, drive down, commute down to the hospital, parking fees, all that stuff is so inconvenient. Like everyone's busy, right? So, for me, more often than not, I'd put off a doctor's appointment. But, you think about being 8 o'clock at night on your couch, hitting a button and being directly connected to a physician that can diagnose and prescribe.
Yes.
It makes it, a better patient experience. You're dealing with things as they happen. It's convenient. And then, the industry benefits as well. So I think telemedicine is going to be a big one. I think, you talk about text messaging, that's convenience too. So, say I'm taking a vitamin 3 times a day, getting that reminder. It's hard to think of that three times a day. So not only are you getting people to adhere to the dosing cycle, which is going to be your best outcome, then the pharmaceutical industry is also benefiting because their product is being consumed, right?
Yes. Well, and then the product is bringing about the results it's supposed to.
That's right.
Because it's being properly administered. I had an experience like that this week where I've just recently started working with a doctor who has a portal.
Yeah.
And it's so cool and so interesting. And I needed to change an appointment.
Yeah.
And that's usually agonizing. You usually have to call. You have to get them at the 2 hours a day that someone is answering the phone.
Yeah.
You've got to explain. You've got to go through all that. They'll call you back. I went on the portal and was able to see the calendar and just like click, click, move myself into a new time. It was amazing. I was
Yes.
so even the littlest things like that can very much impress patients.
Yeah, and I think like telemedicine will be part of that integrated ecosystem,
Yeah.
right? They're going to play a big role. And I think, just having smartphones connected to sensors, I think it was Roche that recently did an MS study, and they were able to have people that were suffering from MS, which is near and dear to my heart because we have people in my family that actually are struggling with it. But they would be able to connect to their smartphone from the comfort of their home, connected to sensors with, gyroscopes and whatnot to measure their balance, how is that changing, and, are they able to twist their wrists, at a certain instance, and then they can see how the disease is progressing in each individual. They have so much more data than what they would get by waiting for that patient to come in and check into a clinic and whatnot. So then you're better informing companies to know how better to attack those diseases, right? So it's really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned also when we talked earlier that you know and communicate with a lot of life sciences CIOs.
I do.
And that there's a lot of great, and I find this often with CIOs in many different industries where there's kind of an open network of sharing, because everybody's trying to solve problems that are in many ways very similar.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about that. You said you all have you text each other, right?
we have a Slack chat, so that we can stay connected with one another.
That's great.
I was talking to someone today about how, we're all, I'm a cloud first company, right? So pretty much everything that we have is in the cloud. So our financials are run on Oracle Fusion Cloud. When they run into a problem at Oracle, all the clients that are using that platform are going to need to work together to figure out how to address it, right? So having that convenience of connection, it helps make sure that we're all making the right choices on behalf of our companies.
Okay.
So it is really important.
Well, and you'd mentioned too, we were talking about the patient and the digital side of the house.
Yeah.
At AMAG. How has that changed since you got there? Your title, you're a VP and head of technology, but it all belongs to you. So do you have like a special digital team? Talk a little bit about how you approach the kind of the digital transformation aspects of what the company's doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's technology, people that were smart with technology in a lot of different areas of the company. I think all companies need to be, orchestrated like that. I think I look at the role of IT as being sort of integrators of all that. I think we've had a lot of good ideas come out of our digital marketing team in particular. They were really champions for a social media platform that we installed last year. We have more stuff coming up in the next year as sort of near-term priorities to help with the patient journey. So, it's spread across, and I think what we try to make sure is that we set up the right governance to put the good ideas on the table to figure out what's the next best thing for us.
Okay. Yes, you had mentioned that you've got some really great marketing thought leaders.
Yeah, we do.
And that always seems like a first step. When IT and marketing are working together, I mean, the kind of power that can come out of that collaboration, it gets other business units in the company wanting to work with IT as well.
Yeah, and I think, I was recently in a working session with my leadership team to develop the 2019 priorities for the team. So one of our overarching goals is continuing to aspire to be a high-performing team. And one of the actions underneath that was to make sure that everyone in technology really understands each of the patient journeys for each of our products, because I think naturally technologists are problem solvers, and if they understand the big picture, it doesn't matter if you're a help desk technician or a strategist. If you understand it, I think that's where your ideas start to come, and AMAG as a whole gets to harness the collective intelligence of the entire organization. So we do have regular all hands meetings with the whole technology team, and we'll bring in like marketing leaders. We had Megan Rivera, who's fantastic for leading that Vyleesi effort, come and speak to how we see that product, what the challenges are, and that better arms my team to contribute.
Well, and I think I've seen this going on across other industries too, where that long-term desire to get IT and business speaking the same language and working together and collaborating seems to really be happening so much more now, as IT people get a real context of what the jobs they're doing, what it leads to.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's just now you came to AMAG from Fidelity Investments, so you came in from the financial industry. What was it about? I guess before that you were in pharmaceutical, but how did your background kind of prepare you for the role you came in for, and what were your marching orders when they brought you in? You joined in the middle of 2017.
Yes. So. My career's been I've been pretty deliberate. I mean, you were joking with me about being an engineer earlier, but I have been pretty deliberate.
I'm just jealous. I was a journalism major, so,
But I've been pretty deliberate with my career. So, I actually started out as an engineer, but in a startup. So you wear a lot of hats, and I tend to be somebody that wants to understand everything. So one of my roles was to implement an MRP system. We didn't have a technology team. So, my role was to implement that, but I went out and trained myself as a developer so I could speak intelligently with the developers, and then I'm like, now I need to speak to the DBA, so I trained myself as a DBA and et cetera. So I've trained up on all those roles. I played different parts of them, but then went from sort of a startup company to a high-tech company, which was sort of a smaller company, and then to a mid-sized company, which was also in high-tech, and then to pharma, which was small growing into mid, and then off to financial services to experience the larger companies. So having experienced different size company and what works really well, I bring that to companies like AMAG who, are on this journey, right? And hopefully they become big, right? But I want to be that person that understands what do they need at this size versus what works at this size, right? And making sure you're not putting too much red tape in place, that you're tailoring it to the environment so it can be as successful as possible. So I think that's kind of what I've been able to bring to the organization.
Well, and that actually speaks well for AMAG, for the board and the CEO, that they didn't get all hung up on we need a particular type of CIO who's got this much experience in pharma only. I have friends who are executive recruiters, and they go through that where they've got somebody who's got a fabulous mixture of experience, but the company's like, no, we need somebody who's an expert in railroad transportation. And I really think a CIO is a CIO across all kinds of different industries.
I agree.
So I just find I'm always fascinated by the career paths, because I think it speaks to how close CIOs have gotten to, well, the basic businesses as well. That was something I mentioned that I've noticed with a lot of my guests on the show. I could be talking to any one of the senior business executives at the company, and it's just, I almost have to remember to let's talk some stuff about technology while we're here. Let's go back to your entry into the company, and you had mentioned that one of the first things you did was centralizing the technology spend.
Sure.
So what's your before and after picture, and the kind of things that you did in that first 90 days or your first year?
Yeah, it was interesting. So after taking the leadership role, about 90 days in, I was asked to give an update to the board, which was a good point of reflection for me. And I look back and realize how much actually happened in those 90 days. And I felt like it was not so much of a success for me or my team, but actually a demonstration of how strong the company values are in my organization. So our president, Bill Hayden, is fantastic, and he really makes sure that our core values are woven into everything that we do. And at our company, it's about accountability, sense of urgency, transparency, and collaboration. So
I was just going to ask you if you could reel off the core values.
I guess I can.
I guess you just
didn't know I had that in me,
yes,
but I do.
I know.
But that's, I mean, I think if you ask a lot of AMAG leaders, they'd be able to do that as well, because it is part of how we operate. But you think about, so one of the first things I did, like you said, was centralized technology, which, by the way, could be a political nightmare, right? You're basically saying, hey, I'm going to take your budget and put it over here, which, is not an easy conversation. But I think what you saw, what I experienced, was the leadership across the organization understood that it was the right thing to do. Because basically on day one, if you asked me, how much does AMAG spend on technology? I could not give you an answer. It was a black box. So by we moved it over, but we also brought full transparency to it. But we also did that in conjunction with standing up a cross-functional governance group. So that has been critical. So now you have leaders from every area of the business. So there's people from commercial, legal, HR, that all have a say. And for every dollar that we have for technology, where's the next best place to be spending it for AMAG? And, centralizing the technology would only have been halfway there. You really make sure that, technology is not making decisions in a vacuum. The only way to make sure we're doing it right is to have cross-functional perspectives, and making sure the leaders around that table are using an enterprise lens to do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's been a big shift for AMAG, but I think that, it's been really healthy for the company. Governance, no one likes that word, but we try to keep it lightweight governance. So, at AMAG, the approach that we've taken is a single business case is basically answering 4 questions. So if you're going to come ask for 6 figures funding, you need to be, or more, you need to be able to answer, like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? What do we expect the value to be to the organization when you're done? Are you increasing revenue? What are you doing? How much is it going to cost me? And then what are the risks associated with it? And what that does is you take all these opportunities, and now you have apples to apples comparison around what's the next best thing for AMAG. And that whole leadership team of we call it the Strategic Technology Committee, literally stack ranks all of these investments. So it does a couple things. Now, on the execution side, so it helps you understand what are the priorities to be funded, but from an execution perspective, you have people that work in either quality assurance or in infrastructure that work on multiple projects. When they're in the heat of whatever's happening and they have to make a trade-off decision, they already know how the leadership values those priorities. And they can say, this is a priority 5 and this is priority 2, so I'm going to focus my energy here. And what that does from a corporate perspective is it makes sure we're delivering the most important investments for the company.
Well, and that is that can be a really serious business failing when you have too many priorities and they aren't ranked in
Yes.
any way when you really don't know the most important stuff. So it's very,
Yeah.
well, and I love that idea that nobody wants to hear the word governance. It's so true. Every now and then when I was editing CIO magazine, we would discuss the idea about maybe we should do a cover story on governance.
Yeah.
And everybody would just kind of hang their heads and say, who's going to want to talk to us about that? And yet it's so vital
It is.
to the collaboration with the business and, that feeling. I think people hear the word governance and they think it's Politburo or
Right.
something, that it's all politics and fighting over scarce resources and that sort of thing, and who's got the most political weight,
Right.
and that sort of thing. But you've worked this governance process into the Strategic Technology Committee
Yeah.
and how it evaluates all the projects.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely correct.
Now, how many projects in a year get accomplished this way? Are we talking like a few dozen or hundreds, or how?
So our
Yeah.
portfolio really focuses on probably the top 10
Okay.
major programs.
All right.
We bring transparency to a lot of the other smaller developments, but for
Yeah.
the most part, it's pretty much the top 10 that we're tracking.
Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit about how how you reorganized IT and restructure. You mentioned that you've got different heads of different leadership areas. I know you established a PMO office.
Yeah.
All of these things were not in place before. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. I think the major trigger point to restructure the team is, one, you want a scalable structure. So, our business strategy is to grow through M&A. So you want to structure that no matter how many more products get added to the portfolio, you're not really changing around your team.
Yeah.
Because that'll just disrupt and slow down. So the big change was to get more business-centric. So we have leaders that represent the three major areas of the business. So for us,
Okay.
it's commercial, R&D, and G&A. Those leaders are accountable for making sure we have a multi-year strategic plan, which is an integrated business and technology roadmap. But not only are they there to develop the plan, they actually are accountable for overseeing the execution of it. So they have individuals
Okay.
underneath them that are executing on these priorities.
Excellent.
So we've also hired an enterprise architect where there's a danger in doing that you stay so siloed that you don't necessarily get the higher level advantage. So we have an enterprise architect where all that rolls up into an enterprise
Oh.
picture.
I
right?
was wondering about that because the silos can lead to little fiefdoms and
Absolutely.
kingdoms. Yeah.
And that's where EAs bring a balance to that.
Yes.
And, we set up certain principles like cloud first, simplify the technology, patient-centric, user-centric type of things, where as we look at new products and opportunities, we're weighing that against our technology principles.
Well, and that actually gives us a nice segue into how the business has been growing forward. You mentioned that the focus was always on the commercial side, but now there's much more going on the clinical side. Explain the difference and what that means in a biopharmaceutical company.
So the commercial side of the house is really focused on, the successful adoption of a new product to market, right?
Okay.
On the clinical side, you're working on investigational assets to hopefully work towards an FDA approval so that you can have it commercially available.
Essentially drugs in the pipeline.
Yes,
All
exactly.
right.
Yep. And you want to have drugs in the pipeline so as patents expire, you have new products coming on so that, your revenue doesn't end up like this. So,
Yes.
the team's been, the management team's been very, very smart in making sure we have a very diversified portfolio.
Well, and a company in the biopharm industry that has been around since 1981 and has continued to grow.
Yeah.
Obviously there's something going on that's working well there.
Yeah.
I always have to ask this, and sometimes the CIOs across the table just roll their eyes, but everybody talks about digital transformation these days.
Yeah.
So I like to bring up and ask, what does it actually mean for your company in your industry? And when we talked earlier, you had a very interesting reaction to the word transformation. So let's talk about that.
I don't love the notion of transformation. It just feels so bohemian, like just gigantic and overwhelming. So for me, like,
I'm a larva and now I'm a butterfly. Yes, that whole problem.
I tend to be someone that's like, paint the picture of what great looks like, and then
Yes.
all your decisions along the way don't feel transformational. They're just one more step closer to getting there.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in paint that vision of what good looks like, and then
Yes.
we'll get there with these steps. This is a strategic plan to get us there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I had recently had a CIO who had a similar objected to the word innovation.
Yeah.
And he said, innovation always sounds like you're having to invent something new. He says, I'm much more tuned into ingenuity. I like that. I like that as an I word. And there was another, oftentimes we talk in this industry about CIOs having a helicopter view across the entire organization with that notion that you really do know all the systems that are running, all the different functions. But it started that, for one thing, it's old. It's been around for 20 plus years. And it started to feel to me like it's too much of an implied distance. The CIO is floating above it all. So now I like to talk about IT, and this fits in beautifully with healthcare, IT being more like a central nervous system for the company. I just really like that notion.
Yeah, that resonates with me.
Yeah. It could be that I've just been talking to so many healthcare CIOs lately, and it's just been
perfectly
on my mind.
in tune with us.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you want a simplified landscape and cloud first, and you're very focused on business adaptability and design for flexibility. How does that spell out, or how does that work out in terms of the projects you have underway? What are the big technology initiatives that you have kind of rolling out over the next year?
So I would, from near-term priorities. So I think, try to paint that picture of, the experience a patient would experience, where everything is convenient and low cost and quality outcomes, and protected as far as privacy goes. So that lends itself to what does AMAG need to do to get to that place and contribute. So two major themes I would say is get the data right. And the second one is how do you help on the patient journey side. So on the data side, for us, we are putting in place a validated CRM platform. We have multiple right now, so we're going to move to one tried and true one, and also complement that with master data management. So make sure we get our data in order before we start really driving analytics and business insights. We have some level of that now, but that's really going to be foundational and scalable. That's the commercial side. On the clinical side, we put in Viva Vault last year for regulatory information management and eTMF, and then moving into this year, clinical trial management system. So we've outsourced. All our data really sits in the CROs right now. So we really want to bring all of that internal.
And a CRO is a
research organization, right?
Okay.
So they're doing a lot of that clinical work for us outside.
Yeah.
So we want to really take ownership of all that data. A big change for us is really treating data as an asset. So bringing it inside, arming people with the data they need to drive analytics and business insights. So that's on the clinical side. And then we're also implementing a safety platform for adverse event reporting as well, with also using AI as an intake. So everything's about scalability and flexibility. So as we add more products and volume increases, you're not staffing up the whole organization. You really have technology in place to keep and remain, a lean, mean organization, so to speak.
Well, and you say lean, mean. You've got AMAG is about a little over 500 people, total employees, but you're doing this with an IT staff of around 25, did you tell me?
That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
That's a lot of hardworking people.
There's a lot of hardworking people.
It sounds like you got a lot going on.
Yeah.
When you think ahead, after these particular things get accomplished, have you also envisioned next year and into 2021?
We have. So we do have a multi-year
I had a feeling, with your engineering approach to things.
Yeah, we do. And I think, so I didn't talk about the patient side of the house. So last year, we did the social media management platform. This year is about social listening and a text messaging platform. So helping on the patient journey and also getting our data in order. I think over the following years, it's really bringing in an enterprise data warehouse. Bringing all that data, not just clinical, but making sure across the board we have all that data internally, and making sure that we continue to secure the organization.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the other one we were talking about the business growth and the kind of things that are going on with the company. You'd mentioned that one of the goals is formalizing a merger and acquisition playbook.
Yeah.
What has been happening since you joined in the M&A space, and is this something that AMAG is likely to accelerate in the future?
Yeah. We just have a great management team that's always looking for the next best opportunity to make us even better as an organization. So, we have had a number of acquisitions lately. We just acquired a company called Paris Fair. So we're bringing more assets in-house. We also last year divested one area of the business, which was the cord blood registry. So we really need to be good at execution. There's hard deadlines on how do you separate technologies or bring in and merge technologies. So, it's important that that goes smoothly. That has visibility all the way up to the board. That it really needs to be right. You're bringing more people, especially in an acquisition, bringing more people onto the team, and you got to help them acclimate as quickly as possible so that you can all move forward together faster. In results. So I think we are working on an IT M&A playbook to make sure that we're very thoughtful, comprehensive, and also fast.
How do you, as a CIO, how do you venture into the M&A world? Because you haven't been deeply involved in it previous, so this is your first fun experience with getting involved on the merger.
I've been more involved with M&A, much more in AMAG than any other role that I've had in the past. I just think there's great leaders within AMAG. Everyone kind of knows their own space, and they're so collaborative, and technology has a seat at the table. They bring us in early. We're not getting surprised in the 11th hour. They appreciate the value that technology is bringing to the table to make sure that we're doing the right level of due diligence and planning to make sure the assimilation process is smooth. So, it's been fantastic on how respected the technology has been.
Is this one of the areas where you're able to tap into your other CIO friends in life sciences? Is it a Slack discussion thread?
I don't know if I'd had to tap on too many peers for that necessarily. I really rely on the leaders on my team. A lot of them have a lot of experience with M&A, and I trust them, and they're very much trusted by my business colleagues as well, and they drive a lot of that.
Okay. Well, I think that's excellent about tech having a seat at the table. Because over the years when I've interviewed CIOs, that's been one of the biggest failings that companies can have is like they'll be getting ready to sign the contracts and they'll say, "Oh, we should get IT involved in this." Can you imagine? That just be that would be awful. As you mentioned, pivoting to expand development capabilities in the clinical development areas. How does the talent acquisition play into that for you? Do you find a lot of times when I talk to CIOs, especially in the Boston area, it's like 0.001% IT unemployment, so it can be very hard to find talent. What is your experience with that?
As far as hiring within technology or supporting the growth of the clinical area?
Within technology.
Within technology? It's a hot market right now, getting the right talent. The thing I've seen really impressive is the people coming in to interview just get such a good impression of all the leaders within AMAG. They can really feel the sense of collaboration and team that draws people. And I think also having a focus in women's health, or even in anemia, but like in these therapeutic areas, sometimes people have a personal connection with the work that's being done in the organization, and it is a bit of a draw.
Well, and you mentioned that too, that for you felt like your heart was really in life sciences.
I've I said, I've been in high tech and financial, and they're all wonderful, but I think being in pharma, it's easy to get out of bed every morning. You're impacting, somebody's health or life, or, it's potentially saving lives. I'm not going to be a doctor ever. So this is how I can play a role in that. And, it is easy to be motivated.
Okay, good. Well, I wanted to circle back and talk a little bit more about data analytics and the idea of moving toward an enterprise data warehouse and that. Do you think eventually you'll need like a chief data officer, or does that fall to the CIO? There's only so many things CIOs can do when their roles get overwhelming. So how do you approach that from a leadership aspect in terms of having the kind of data assets and your talent that you need to do this?
You talk about innovation. The way I frame that with my team is around meaningful innovation, right? So I think we're working now on our enterprise data warehouse strategy, and we want to do it in a thoughtful way that's going to add value sooner, and not just go after everything all at once. Where are the best opportunities to do that? So I think we're working through that now, and that's one of our bigger deliverables this year.
Well, and you mentioned too that you're also under development for an enterprise technology strategy.
Yes.
How is that different from a run-of-the-mill regular technology strategy? What is the part that makes that enterprise tech strategy?
It's been a really important part of the role that I do right now is I learned a lot about our business just going through this. Like I said, I was sat in every interview. I think hearing not only where the company wants to go, but I think it also puts some good. It's almost like a forcing function for all of us to be strategic, because you're asking leaders across the organization, what's your vision for where you want to go? And I think some people probably have never been in a position where they were asked that.
Right.
So getting more people to articulate that helps to weave together a plan that's making sure we have the right technology when the organization needs it, and getting alignment around that. And I think, it's really pulling together what's best for the enterprise as a whole. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. One of the tell me a little bit more about your cloud strategy. It is a cloud first strategy, meaning you're going to look at a cloud platform before you build something internally. How much are you in the cloud now, kind of percentage wise?
Everything's in the cloud for us.
Everything.
Yes, we have no real on-prem for anything.
Oh, that's kind of a
it's
minus
refreshing.
a lot of headaches there.
I've been in
right?
roles where there's like a 10-year plan to get there, and
Yes.
coming to AMAG was quite refreshing. So we're very well positioned to be very
okay.
scalable and flexible going forward, just
Yeah.
given the nature. So that's why we're very careful with governance to make sure we're looking at these principles and respecting them as we bring new products in house.
Yeah, yeah. Is the governance, back to the dreaded G word? Is it essential? Is that something written down? Are there principles around it, or is it simply the practical aspects that come out of the business goals that the CEO sets?
Yeah. So as part of that enterprise tech strategy, one of it is getting your technology principles on paper. So we're in that process of talking to all the business leaders to make sure these are the right principles and that we're all in alignment and agreement that those are them.
Yeah.
And with that new EA role, what that role will bring to the governance process this year is formal architectural reviews for all new investments. So you're making sure you're doing a level of review that's reflective of those principles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit more about innovation. When you at the end of 2017, you put together a vision for this transformative path forward in the organization, and then as you got into 2018, you were shifting more around focusing on specific processes.
Yeah.
What do you have? Is it a structured approach to innovation, or is it more unstructured? Is it one of those innovation is everybody's job, or?
Yeah, so so I think for our technology organization, we kind of had to crawl, then walk, and now I think we're off and running. So making something too formalized around innovation probably wouldn't have gone over well, because we really had to make sure we address some fundamental areas.
Yeah.
So for innovation for us for 19 to part of that goal setting conversation that I had with my leadership team was everyone's accountable for having something related to innovation in their weighted goals for the year. And it's not about it has to be successful, because I think that failure is just as important as success. It's about trying something, trying to learn more about the business and come up with an idea on how to solve a problem. That to me is meaningful innovation. It helps the business move forward.
Yeah.
So we are structuring that this year to take personal accountability from a technology perspective, but I hope my aspiration is to raise it up to also maybe get something more cross-functional in the organization to drive that. I meet with business leaders all the time. There's such a great passion. I mean, it probably starts with Bill, our president, but all the leaders I meet with have such great passion around innovation. There's excitement when you talk about AI. That doesn't just come from technology or digital marketing. It's everywhere.
All right. Well, good. Well, let's talk more about AI, because emerging tech trends, I'm interested in the ones that impact the biopharmaceutical market itself. And AI, robotics, machine learning, they all come up a lot these days with CIOs. But you're doing work in AI right now. Talk about what you have going on.
So last year, we had a big focus on information security. So we put in a number of technologies to help bring better visibility to the data and how it's moving, and making sure that we were able to detect and prevent. Part of that was, stepping into AI with the next-gen antivirus. So making sure, the threat landscape is constantly changing.
Yes.
So AI or machine learning is a perfect technology to understand how it and how it's evolving, and then making sure we're protecting the organization accordingly. So
Yeah.
it's a good fit with security in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And then going into 19, we are leveraging, like I said, for that safety platform. So that intake process will learn, what type of events are being reported, and can you automate a lot of that
Yes.
in.
Well, and I recently talked with a CIO who was saying that a lot of his focus is starting to shift to trying to find and ferret out the things that have gotten into the system that you're not as aware of.
Yeah.
It used to be protecting the perimeter, and now, especially with all the partners you work with
Yes.
a lot of the data in the cloud and all, it's more about knowing you've been invaded.
Yeah, and I almost see it as like most companies should make sure they're using a managed service provider, because then
Yeah.
you're paying for experts in the field with big armies of security engineers to really
Yeah.
understand it all and stay on top of it for you.
Yes.
And then inside, you have a responsibility to make sure you have all the right technology controls in place to detect and feed off to those. But your managed service provider is going to be the one that's 24/7 monitoring, and
Yeah.
you need a team that really knows how to respond quickly to these incidents and in a meaningful way to really shut things down early.
Yeah.
And learn from them.
Have you changed, or has AMAG changed the way user education is done around cybersecurity?
I wouldn't say we changed. I think we're actually pretty effective. We have a great information security officer. His name's Don Cook. Really putting in place the right type of campaigns to bring awareness to the field force. Our numbers are fantastic as seeing the progress of putting out these campaigns. I just think our workforce is really smart, and they learn well. And I think security in general almost is like an interesting topic for anybody in the
Yes.
company.
Yeah.
And I think everybody goes through certain onboarding training and all that. And I think there's an excitement about it, and people are good about it.
Well, and I think too that I'm always telling my help desk there's the SUE issue, the stupid user errors, where you've opened up an email, and I think we're all getting better now about catching the phishing stuff.
Yeah.
I've gotten so paranoid about it that I at one point I missed some important email from HR.
Yeah.
Because I thought when I saw it, I thought it looked like a phishing thing, and I sent it to the help desk, and they said, "No, it's okay if you open this one. That's really
but you
from
almost
the
want that level of paranoia. It's healthy for the
They
company.
were very encouraging too. They said, "Good for you."
Yeah.
That, you sent over an important HR email saying this looks like phishing to me.
Yeah, and I think even our board is
yeah.
very engaged with cybersecurity. They're inviting us to
Yes.
come give updates because they very much want to understand what that looks like and how it impacts the company and what we're doing about it. So
Yes.
there's great top-down, support around information security.
And as we wrap up here, let's talk a little bit about your view of IT leadership and balancing the competing demands on your role, which are every bit as much business as they are technology related. What would you counsel your CIO friends about being a great CIO and the things that you've found that really work well for you?
In my mind, I almost think of it not even so much as a CIO, but as a business leader.
Okay.
I have to put in a plug for the Patriots because the Super Bowl is coming up. But I kind of think like these
By all means, we love that around here.
But I almost think you have to be sort of the Bill Belichick of the business world. You've got to engineer the right team to build a lasting dynasty. And I think that's how you handle the demands. If you have all the right team members on your team,
Yeah.
you're going to execute, and you're going to execute well. So I think it's really about forming the right team with the right
Okay.
talent.
Well, and you mentioned too, when we talked about this before, the governance word came up again. You
Yeah.
talked about cross-functional governance.
Yes.
And by that, you mean technology and business all
together.
Cross-functional is way outside of IT.
Yeah,
It
and
gets-
technology should never make decisions in a vacuum, ever, because they're not going to make the right ones. It's really getting multiple perspectives together and make a better decision. And
Yep.
I think that's critical to everybody's success.
Okay. And last question I had for you was about women in IT
Yeah.
and getting more gender and racial and educational diversity into IT. I know this is a focus for you. And,
Yeah.
So how did that come about, and what do you do about it?
So I'll share a quick story. I was at a conference for CIOs a few years back. I won't
Yeah.
say when. And after a keynote, I went to go meet a colleague. So I go up to the colleague, and he introduced me to the rest of the group, which I didn't know. And they said, "Okay, everybody, this is Shannon Gath." And the first comment was, "Oh, is that your wife?" because it was more likely that I was somebody's wife than a CIO. And I think that was a catalyst for me to say, okay, we need to change this. And the worst part about it, the person that said that was the only female CIO in that group. So if we can't even see ourselves in these roles,
good
you know,
Lord.
it's going to hold us back. So I think for me, that's something I carry with me everywhere. I'm a big advocate for women, you know.
Yes.
So I'll invest a ton of time in that space. I was in 2018 was the chair of our women's network at AMAG, and I sit on the advisory board for the women's network for the Boston Chamber of Commerce as well. So trying to reach out and make sure that we continue to make progress and change. I'm a big believer in getting to an equitable environment for everybody, but it's got to be men and women working together to solve for that gender gap. It can't just be women. Yeah. So, you know, that's really what I approach, you know, and try to lead with.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I increasingly have conversations oftentimes with male CIOs who, you know, are either talking about the efforts they have underway, or they are in an exploratory mode because they know they really need to do this and they want to do it. They want to get the talent diversity is actually what drives the innovation and
absolutely
and the transformation word as well, right? And we certainly have a long way to go. In
I
IT.
Totally agree.
I know I look around at as I'm putting together agendas for my different events, because I do 10 of them during the year, and I tend to go after, you know, the CIOs that have great stories to tell and are responding to me, and usually there's some point where I stop and look at them, I'm like, do I just have all 50-something white guys going to sit on stage? Not that there's anything wrong with 50-something white guys, but it's just, and I've had women come up to me at our events. If it was a panel where it ended up, you know, being all men on the panel, they we're noticing. People are noticing, and it doesn't count that I'm on stage.
No, but I think it's, if you watch 60 Minutes last year, you had Mark Benioff on there.
Yes.
And he was basically out there saying diversity is my top priority. And when you have more and more leaders doing that, I think you're starting to see changes. I mean, back in my earlier days, I was the only female at the leadership table. Forever. And then now it's very different. Like, it's now it's a much more, almost a 50-50 split in most of the environments that I'm in. And that's a great change. It's not everywhere.
Well, no, and it's not. And we have it. There's a huge percentage of women in IT. It's like 50, 60% even. Yeah. But when you get up to IT leadership levels, it gets into the single digits.
Absolutely.
So definitely something that we will keep working on. So, all right. We will expect great things from AMAG in the future on that. Well, I guess your team is already very diverse. You said you probably have half that are women and different minorities.
AMAG as a whole is a great, split of women versus men. It's a great environment to work in.
Okay, good. We will head into the future with that. Thank you so much for your time today. And thank our audience for joining in and taking part in this conversation with Shannon Gath from AMAG Pharmaceuticals. We will see you back here again. I have a special way for you to celebrate Valentine's Day. On February 14th, I will be here at 10 in the morning talking with Christy Grinnell, who is the CIO at General Dynamics Information Technology. So I hope you will join us then. And if you tuned in late to my conversation with Shannon, by all means, check out CIO.com. On our homepage, we have links where you can get to the entire video conversation here. And we also put this as an audio podcast on all the places where you get podcasts. So thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.